Relationships will only work when both partners have respect for each other. Today, I have brought you two stories where they both think grasses are greener on the other side. When that didn't work, they try to get back what they lost. Let's see that in the first story. We dated for 4.5 years. We got along really well, but she was pretty self-absorbed. We'd spend half or most of our time talking about her problems, insecurities, etc. She'd get upset otherwise. I sometimes thought about breaking up, but never did because I didn't want to hurt her. But then, she meets a guy and doesn't tell me about him until she was sure they had something going, and she breaks up with me. She then shuts me out of her life. I was honestly depressed for a few good months, but she refused to help. Called me a couple of times to talk about herself. I felt stupid and used, but I pulled myself out of the mud. I learned a lesson the hard way. Then, she starts emailing me. Apparently, her boyfriend won't tolerate her emotional outbursts, mood swings, insecurities, and broke up with her. The same day, she says how it was such a mistake to let me go, how I was the best guy that she could find. I agreed to talk to her, but I would never want a relationship again. She's rationalized things to a degree where she thinks everything she did was perfectly justified. Now, I can do two things. I can be the bigger person and plainly tell her that she's going to have to move on. Or, I could tell her what I think of her. I won't throw insults at her or anything. I'm just going to say I hope you realized that you've lost me because you're so self-absorbed. You treat people terribly. I don't love you at all anymore. I doubt she's going to learn anything from this, but it would certainly make my chest lighter to tell her how bad she is. What would you do? Edit. Thanks, Reddit. I didn't expect that this would get very many replies, but since you've taken the time to write to me, I've read every comment. I just wanted to mention, before I wrote this, I had been ignoring her for a while, and was wondering if there was anything I should do to stop her from trying to get in touch with me. Anyway, I just kept ignoring her. The emails and messages have not stopped, but they have slowed. I'm just going to leave it at that. I've realized from advice of friends, your comments, that leaving her hanging is probably the thing that bothers her the most. She cheated and betrayed his love, but it all went to vain at the end. Now she wants what she lost. Now the same thing happens in the next story, but on a next level. Let's see in the second story what happened in it. I, 27 male, had been previously in a toxic relationship with my ex-girlfriend, who we will call R. R and I had nothing in common, which to this day makes me question why we even dated in the first place. We started dating after we've been hanging out with the same friend group when we were both 20. She was the one who asked me out first, which I agreed since I liked her a bit. We started dating for 4 months, then made it official that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. After a year, she started getting annoyed with everything I do. She would go crazy if she saw me baking or knitting. I love doing this stuff because my mother taught me those things since I was a child. I was the shy type who didn't like talking a lot or doing what other boys do these days. I can describe myself as a calm person, but she didn't like that. She hated who I was. She would constantly scream at me to be a man and stop acting like a woman. To be honest, it hurted a lot, especially when my self-esteem was really low. Day after day, it started getting worse. When her birthday came, I baked a cake, especially for her since I knew she loved cheesecake. Guess what she did? She was livid and screamed at the top of her lungs about how I was a pussy, and threw the cake I made her. She went to her friend's house that night, while I cried myself to sleep. The last straw came when I adopted my cat. Nina, she was a small kitten when I adopted her. I loved her the moment I laid my eyes on her, so I decided to take her home with me. When R saw her, she almost lost her mind and started screeching about how disgusting it was to have a cat. She tried to take Nina, but I pushed her away and finally snapped. I told her how I had enough of her, and I wouldn't let her bring me down anymore. I wouldn't change who I was for someone who doesn't even appreciate me. It was a huge argument, and I told her to get the fuck out of my apartment because it's over, and I wouldn't let anyone disrespect me this way again. She started packing her things while telling me that she doesn't need me and will find herself a real man. 2 years passed, and I met my now wife. She was the complete opposite of RR, adorable, calm, sweet, loving, a literal angel. I met her because I constantly saw her whenever I brought Nina to the vet. It turned out she was there because her father worked as a vet. She came to visit him and play with other pets. It was so adorable, and I felt myself developing feelings for her. We started talking, and I discovered that we share almost the same interests, like we were made for each other. We talked more, and I built up the courage to ask her out. The date was perfect. We talked and laughed, laid down chatting all night. I told her about my story with my ex, which she comforted me and told me that she doesn't know what she lost, that I was a wonderful and a sweet man that lacks nothing. I started tearing up, and she hugged me. She was so sweet to me and loved playing with Nina. Every time I looked at myself, yes, this is the woman I want to marry after a few dates. We became official, and I couldn't be happier. We got married, and I felt like I was on cloud 9. Fast forward last year, I get a knock on my door, which to my surprise, it was RR, my ex, who made me miserable. I tried closing the door, but she held it, saying she came here to apologize. I told her whatever it is, it's forgiven and forgotten. But she said it was a different thing. Turns out one of my friends gave her my address. Don't worry, I already cut off that friend. Anyways, R started apologizing, and I could see the color drain from her face when she saw my wedding ring on my finger. Suddenly, she broke down and said how much she missed me. She wanted us to be back together, which disgusted me. She continued crying about how her past relationships were toxic, and her ex treated her like shit, while I treated her like a queen. I told her fuck no. I wouldn't leave the woman who loved me for who I am, and made me happy to someone who never gave a shit about my feelings. I told her to get fucked, or I'll get a restraining order, then closed the door. That day, I told my wife everything. She was so happy for me that I stood up for myself and told my ex how much pain she caused me. This was last year. Now we have a beautiful daughter together. I'm glad I met such a sweet woman who made me happy and started a family with me. But I'm mostly happy that in the end, I knew my worth. He removed the toxic relationship from his life, and as time moved on, he got a better life with a happy family. If you loved the story, subscribe now and prepare to be hooked on the electrifying stories we have in store for you.